Hi, my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craze Books, and let's talk November releases. So I decided that I'm going to start trying to post these most anticipated release videos a little bit earlier in the month than I used to. I used to wait till the month was over, but I thought I would do it more mid-month before the last week so that you have some time to pre-order, and because it's just so much fun. And I just love filming these and researching for them, so I just get so excited to film these every month, and my patience is just waning at this point. I really want to film this video. And it is October 19th today. Let me see. Yep, October 19th today, and it's supposed to snow in 40 minutes. That's when it says it's going to start. And to me, that just means winter is coming. Fall is over here already. I do live in Northern Ontario, Canada, so yeah, that's pretty typical. This seems a little early for snow, but I did used to wear snowsuits on Halloween while trick-or-treating. It would ruin my costume, all that jazz. So I guess it's not that strange, but if it does end up snowing, I will insert a clip of it here so you can see. So to me, that means it's time to move on, and I've read a lot of spooky books this month. I'm ready for something different. I'm ready for November releases. I've already posted my nonfiction November TBR. I am just ready. So the first day of November, November 1st, it's a huge release day, and I will say that like November and December, they're kind of quieter months in terms of releases, but I think this November is pretty strong. So the first one is actually a book that I did put on my nonfiction November TBR, which is my last video. I will link that down below. And this is Deliberate Cruelty. Obviously it's nonfiction, and the tagline says, Truman Capote, the Millionaire's Wife, and the Murder of the Century. And this is by Roseanne Montillo, and I have a fascination with Truman Capote. I really was into the In Cold Blood era of his life, but this point of his life I don't know much about, and this is when he wrote his last book, Unanswered Prayers, which never released, and the scandal that came from that. He was friends with Anne Woodward, who was like a socialite, and ends up shooting her husband, claiming that he was a burglar, and nobody really believes her. Truman Capote doesn't believe her. He writes a fiction book that is very loosely veiled. The names are hardly changed. Everybody knows who he's talking about. He released pages of this book, and it really got him ostracized. Huge scandal. Everybody hated him at that point. So I am curious to see more of that time of his life. I just think he's a really interesting person, obviously very flawed, and I cannot wait for this one. So that comes out November 1st. And then I have Someday Maybe by Robinelli, and this deals very much with grief. It is no surprise. I've said this before that I like books that deal with grief, but I haven't read one in a while, and the earlier reviews of this one are fantastic. But I just want to read you the beginning of this because I know this is going to have a lot of triggers, so be warned. It says, here are 3 things you should know about my husband. He was the great love of my life despite his penchants for going incommunicado. He was, as far as I and everyone else could tell, perfectly happy, which is significant because on New Year's Eve he committed suicide. So obviously heavier themes in here. We're following a main character who is dealing with the loss of her husband, and she is the one that found his body, and he committed suicide, and her untangling what that means about their history. And I think we go back to when they met, and we follow all the way up to his death and then her grieving afterwards. But I've heard excellent reviews. Obviously one I have to be in the mood for, and I've been avoiding books about grief the last year or two, but I do really like them, and this looks like a good one, and I think this is a debut as well, so I always like to try debuts. Then we have Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. I do hope, this is a spoiler for my next video, which will be another TBR because I'm participating in a readathon and I want to get this book on there. So the one that I want to read is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell, and this Ocean's Echo, it's not a sequel, but I think it's almost like a companion book because it's all set in the same world. It's just following different characters. And I've heard great things about Winter's Orbit, but this one I haven't told. I think that Angela from Literary Science Alliance said it's not as romance heavy, so know that going into this one, but it does seem like it's more of a romance when you read the synopsis. But I just like space operas. I've realized that I've neglected them a little bit, and this sounds like a fun YA one. And it's following a rich socialite who can read minds, and they're very dangerous people, but when they can be controlled, they're a very good weapon. And I think he has a romance with somebody who is called like an architect and can manipulate people's minds, and they're supposed to have like a bond, like a sync bond, but the architect doesn't feel that that's right and he doesn't want to do it, so they fake it. So it's almost like fake dating, but more like this fake bond, which I think could be really fun. And then they have to kind of save the world or something. They have a romance. I think it's going to be a good time, but I do want to get to Winter's Orbit first. Now, I've said I have issues with thrillers lately. I'm having a really hard time finding thrillers that I love, so I'm working through that and realizing that I tend to like thrillers set on college campuses. I don't know what that is. I think that's just like my dark academia heart coming out. So if you put a thriller on a college campus, I might like it. So this one is called The Resemblance by Laura Nauset, and this is exploring Greek life and all the problems there. It's following a detective who's investigating a hit and run, and somehow it involves Greek life at this college campus, and she starts to unravel all the secrets there. I think there's something connected to her past with this as well. So some good reviews already. I just like the setting of that one, so I'm hopeful. I don't always love like police detective thrillers, but I like them better than domestic thrillers, so I am going to try that one. I've really fallen in love with like cozy fantasy this year, so this sounds perfect for me. It's Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie and Holmberg, and actually Becky from Bex Reads reviewed this on her Instagram and said she really liked it. We talked about it for a second in the comments, and it sounds like something that I'm gonna really like. It is also historical. I like historical fantasy, and this is more paranormal. I love a sentient house, so much about this works. It's set in Rhode Island in 1846, and it follows a main character who's estranged from his family, but I think his grandfather dies and leaves him this house, so he goes to this house, a trope that I love. I love like inheriting haunted homes, and I think the house is almost keeping him in there and forcing him to stay in there, and he hires this woman who is going to help release him or come to terms with this house. He has to form some kind of relationship with this house, but he also falls in love with this woman. But I heard it does have a creep factor, but it does sound like it's kind of cozy. There's a romance, so there's just so many of my buzzwords in that one. Another book coming out on November 1st that is on my nonfiction November TBR, again, leave that down below, is Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry, who obviously played Chandler on Friends, and this is just the story of his addiction. I know that he was in active addiction for a few seasons of Friends, but I think he's been very private about his life, so I am curious to know more. I am trying to read a few celebrity memoirs in November, so that is a high priority, and I will definitely be listening to that on audio. This next one is one I don't know too much about, but Sarah from the channel Brighton Bookish read an arc of this one, and they said that it's fantastic and it's made them more curious about dark academia, so that is exciting to me. And it's The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, and The Cloisters is part of the Met in New York, so I like that setting. I'm a big setting person. That sounds really good. And The Cloisters is like medieval art. I think they're really cool gardens there and stuff, so that is where this is set. And our main character gets a job there and an internship there, and maybe there's some magic. I think tarot cards and fortune telling are a big deal in this. We're getting a few of those this year, which I think is interesting, and I always like New York as a setting. I like anything to do with art in books, so potential there. And it says, what does it see here? It's a haunting and magical blend of genres, which I also like. This is also a debut, and she becomes obsessed with the history of fortune telling, and she discovers a hidden 15th century deck of tarot cards that might hold the key to predicting the future. So that sounds fun, and I trust Sarah's recommendations. I think we have similar taste when it comes to fantasy, so that is high priority. This next one had a couple bad words just in the first paragraph of the synopsis, and I added it to my TBR right away. It's Cruel Illusions by Maggie Fuston, and this is Corvallo meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've never read Corvallo, but anything compared to Buffy the Vampire Slayer I will want to read. And it's a dark young adult fantasy about a girl who makes a deal with a magic secret society, give me a secret society and that's a win, to enter a potentially deadly competition for the chance to avenge her mother's death. So her mom is killed by vampires, then vampires disappear, and she spent her whole life trying to find vampires to get revenge. So he ends up going to some kind of magician show and realizes that some of this is all too real. She goes behind stage, sees them in acts that they can't explain. They tell her that she does have magic and they will teach her so that she can get revenge against the vampires, but she has to prove herself in this competition first. Sounds like a blast. This next one, if you know me at all, this is no surprise. Salt and Sugar by Rebecca Corvallo. You show me a cute foodie romance, I'm gonna add it to my TBR. This one is YA. It's the grandchildren of two Brazilian bakeries fall in love despite their family's feud. Love it. That you've got male trope, Brazilian food. Just love everything about that. I know I'm gonna love that one. That one just looks like fun. Oh, as I said, November 1st is a big one. Now we got a couple Christmas ones, or holiday ones. Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane, who wrote The Charm Offensive, which I know is widely popular and I have not read. I want to get to it. I had the audiobook downloaded and I've had it for ages. I need to get to that one, but this one sounds more up my alley. This is a festive romantic comedy about a woman who fakes an engagement with her landlord only to fall for his sister. So I think our two main characters have like a really cute meet cute. Is it at a bookstore? Is that what I wanted to do? It doesn't say. I thought, for some reason I thought a bookstore was involved in this, but I guess not. But she has her dream job in animation. They meet like on Christmas Eve or something. Then they wake up the next morning, they have a disagreement. She actually ends up losing her job, and then we go years later. She is living, and she's renting a house or an apartment, and she has this deal with her landlord who needs to be married to get his inheritance, and she's having financial troubles. So they have this arrangement where they will have this marriage of convenience, and they decide to celebrate Christmas with his family to like kind of trick the family. If you ever seen Holiday Engagement, like that kind of that movie that I think is so much fun, like that kind of trope. And it turns out that his sister is the woman that she had that one night stand with all those years ago, and it's their love story. So I think that is going to be wonderful, and I do have an e-arc of that. And then speaking of arcs, when this came to my door, I was so excited. Thank you, HarperCollins Canada, HTC Frenzy, you guys are the best. This is How to Excavate a Heart by Jake Maya Arlo. And okay, look at this cover. There's a corgi on it and it has boots on. So that is already a win for me. I think this is enemies to lovers. And somebody's a dog walker. There's a hit and run. All I really know is that these two characters end up snowed in together on Christmas Eve and fall in love, but I think they hate each other at first. And this is just so cute. And it's Jewish as well. It's sapphic. It's just so many of the buzzwords, so many interesting things. This is probably my most anticipated festive romance, holiday romance of the year. And I just love the snowed in trope where you're stuck together, so I think that's going to be a good one. Okay, that was it for November 1st. Now we'll move on to November 8th. We have another Christmassy one. This is Whiteout, and this is by a slew of authors who, I'll show you it because I can grab it right here, wrote Blackout. And this, it's not a sequel or anything, it's just a different concept. So Blackout was a set of short stories that all took place during a blackout in New York, and then Whiteout is the same group of authors writing short stories during a blizzard, so during Christmas time. So I think that is going to be really fun. And it's Tiffany D. Jackson, who I love, my author for me. So obviously I was going to read this. Danielle Clayton, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. This next one was a title ad for me, but it's called Better Than Fiction by Alexa Martin. So look at this cover, the title. Of course I want to read a romance with that title, and it says love isn't always by the books, in this charming romantic comedy about a bookseller discovering how to be a main character in her own story. So this woman inherits her grandmother's bookstore, but she's not a reader. And she ends up having a relationship with an author who is determined to make her fall in love with reading. And I think they go around the city and do all this like bookish stuff. I think there's like a book club at her bookstore of older women that are kind of a pain, but she are charming and she kind of falls in love with. So I think that could be really sweet. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have an e-arc of this one and I've read the synopsis many times, but it just is so convoluted. Don't really know what's going on here, but I do think I'm gonna love this. And this is Children of Ragnarok by Cinda Williams-Chima, who wrote a really popular series. Like I remember when this series first came out, it was so well loved, and I've heard good things about her writing. So I'm really excited about this. This is the first book in a new series. It's YA, it's Norse mythology, which I don't know much about. Like honestly, just be real. Everything I know about Norse mythology and Ragnarok and all that comes from Marvel. So I don't think I have a lot of great knowledge on this. And I read Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman. So really that is the scope of what I know. So I think that is why the synopsis is a bit confusing for me, but I'm so excited to learn more, explore this. Reviews have been fantastic. Know that this is a great author. So I have an e-arc of that. Hopefully I'll get to that soon. This next one is so out of my comfort zone, but I've been trying to find what I like in epic fantasy, and I'm just confused. There's things I like, things I don't like. It's just a learning curve for me, but this one really called out to me, and this is Empire of Exiles by Aaron M. Evans, and this is published by Orbit, so that is always a plus for me. I do trust Orbit, but I just want to read you the synopsis, a little bit of the synopsis of this one. It says, 27 years ago, a duke with a grudge led a ruthless coup against the Empire of Semilla, killing thousands. He failed. The duke was executed, a terrifyingly powerful sorcerer was imprisoned, and an unwilling princess disappeared. The empire moved on. Now when Quill, an apprentice scribe, arrives at the capital city, he believes he is on a simple errand for another pompous noble, fetch ancient artifacts from the magical imperial archives. He always found his apprenticeship to be dull work, but these aren't just any artifacts. These are the instruments of revolution, the banners under which the duke led his coup, and I think it all unravels from that. So I think that could be really fun, and for some reason that calls to me, so I'm gonna try that one. So I read Unconquerable by Kate Elliott for the Book Checkout Book Club. Our live show is on Sunday, 1 p.m. PST, 2 p.m. Eastern. I will leave all of the info you need for that down below. But that reminded me, I do like space operas, and sometimes I like them more than fantasy. So I need to add more sci-fi to my TBR. And this is The Stars Undying by Emery Robin, another Orbit release. Orbit is great. And this is a spectacular space opera debut, perfect for readers of Ancillary Justice and A Memory Cult Empire, which I do want to read, inspired by the lives of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. And I have plans to read a book about Cleopatra in nonfiction November, so I think it would be fun to read like the space opera retelling of their story. So I just think that looks like a good time, and I'm really open to trying that one. And I need to read more space operas because I do enjoy them when I pick them up. They require more brain power for me, but I do like them. Speaking of sci-fi, the next one I have is Africa Risen, and this is made by, it's like a collection from different editors. So this is a new era of speculative fiction, and it is all stories by African authors or African diaspora authors. And it says, a group of cabinet ministries query a supercomputer containing the minds of the country's ancestors. A child robot on a dying planet uncovers signs of fragile new life. A descendant of a rain goddess inherits her grandmother's ability to change her appearance and perhaps the world. So really fun short stories. Again, I always put short story collections on my TBR and I never get to them, but this one really does sound good. Then of course, one I know so many of us have been excited for, Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn, does come out in November. And obviously this is the sequel to Legendborn. I'm not going to read you the synopsis of the sequel, but Legendborn follows a main character named Bree, who is grieving the loss of her mother. She ends up going to, she's in high school, but she ends up going to this program on a college campus and realizes that there is this secret society there. This is like an Arthurian retelling, embraces her magic. There is a love triangle, which I don't love, but I think Bree as a character is really interesting, and how she deals with grief and discovering her history and everything is, and the generational trauma that is going on is what makes that book good. So I'm looking forward to the sequel. And then November 15th, probably my most anticipated book of the release is Heart of the Sun Warrior by Sue Lintan, which is the sequel to The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, which came out earlier this year. So I'm so thrilled that we're getting both of these books over the course of 1 year. It took me a minute to get into The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, but I fell in love with it. And this obviously follows the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and her mother has been trapped on the moon. Nobody else knows that she exists. She has to run away at some point to hide her existence. She infiltrates herself into the community, into the royal family. Maybe there's a love triangle happening here. Just a lot goes on, and the writing's really beautiful. And I'm just so excited, and you cannot deny that this is one of the most striking covers you've ever seen. And then Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse comes out on November 15th, and I have read this. Simon & Schuster Canada sent this to me, so thanks to them. I love this. This is my first Rebecca Roanhorse, and it won't be my last. I won't say why. I might be reading something else next month, but yeah, I love this. I think that the world that Rebecca Roanhorse built in so few pages was fantastic, but I talked about this in a recent wrap-up, so I will leave that linked down below. But we're following two sisters it's almost a Western world, and there are angels and demons, and it's very gray. And our main character's sister is arrested for the death of a god-like character, and she is sent to jail, and it's really following our main character trying to free her sister, but maybe learning some truths that she didn't understand or didn't want to admit to. And there's a demon. It's not a love story, I will tell you that, but her ex-boyfriend is a demon, and he is in here. He's a great character. She works at a bar, so there's some great characters there as well. I just thought the world that Rebecca Roanhorse created was fantastic, and I hope she writes more from here because I think there's so much potential for more. Then I have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter, and this is just a YA contemporary romance, but I did read Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter in the summertime, and I really liked this. This one I'm a little nervous about because I don't like the Groundhog Day trope. I don't like when we go through the same day over and over again. It just plays out a little differently. Usually that doesn't work for me, but I do want to try this. So this takes place on Valentine's Day, so maybe save it for then. But I think it's just this girl, and it's a romance. What does it say here? After living through a dumpster fire of Valentine's Day, Emily escapes to her grandmother's house for some comfort and a consolation pint of Ben & Jerry's. She passes out on the couch, but when she wakes up, she's back home in her own bed, and it's Valentine's Day again. And the next day, another nightmare V-Day. So it's just Valentine's Day over and over again. So I might save that one to read on Valentine's Day. We will see. Moving on to November 22nd, I have The Two Doctors Gorski by Isaac Salman. And this is a short novella. I think it's like 144 pages, but it follows a young woman who was abused in academia. She has some trauma from being in academia, and she ends up moving to rebuild her life, working with this professor, or it's actually a magician, and she can see inside of his head. That's what she does. She's like a mind reader, and she sees inside of his head that there's something dangerous affront, and she kind of has to fight the way she's always been through academia, where she's just kind of a follower and make different choices. So I've heard some good things about this, and I appreciate a good novella. Next is We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammonds, and this is a YA story following a young girl who has moved to a small town, and she's very upset about this, but she quickly makes friends with her next door neighbor and another girl whose mother's murder has gone unsolved. And these three, I think there is a romance in there, but these three girls are trying to figure out the history of the town, and a lot is unraveled and revealed, and it's kind of horrific. So I've been hearing good things about that one. I put Shea Earnshaw's books on my TBR. Every time Shea Earnshaw has a new book, I put it in one of these videos, but I've yet to read anything by Shea Earnshaw. But this is A Wilderness of Stars, another one of these like fortune-telling astrology books that I'm always curious about but never pick up. So this is, in this magical romance from New York Times bestselling author of The Wicked of the Deep, a mysterious illness cursing the land forces a teen astronomer to venture across the wilderness in search of stars' message that will hopefully save them all. So we'll see if I get to that one. And then another one that I have an e-arc of is They're Forever Getting Back Together by Sophie Gonzalez. Of course, Swifties will love that title. And this is a romance following, I think all these characters are on a show like The Bachelor. But what ends up happening is that two of the contestants fall in love. So I think that could be really fun, really dramatic. I do like the Bachelor trope in my romances. I don't watch the show anymore, but something about that in a romance is something that I do really like. And then the last one is House of Yesterday by Diba Zargarpur. And this is taking inspiration from the author's own Afghan Uzbek heritage. This contemporary YA debut is a breathtaking journey into the grief that lingers through generations of immigrant families and what it means to confront the ghosts of your past. So again, I like stories about grief. I like sentient houses. So when they say ghost of your past, I think in this book the ghosts are literal, and our main character ends up in this home where all the secrets of her family and all the trauma from her family are wrapped up in these ghosts, and she's being haunted by them. So I think that could be really beautiful as well. So that is it. I'm sure I missed some. Let me know what book you're most excited to read in November, if it's on my list or not. Let's talk about it. And I look forward to doing this in December because I do have a few, and I just hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for your support. I will talk to you again soon. Bye for now.